Welcome to season 16 of Seen from Above. I'm Julia Wagemann, co-founder of thriveGEO. This season features 4 episodes highlighting winning teams and outcomes from the GenAI for Geospatial Challenge, an initiative by AWS and thriveGEO that awards cloud credits and technical support to innovators across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, developing bold, generative AI-powered geospatial solutions for global challenges. In our final episode of the season, I speak with Nadine Alameh, founder of LunateAI, and Phil Cooper, geospatial global lead for the public sector team at AWS. Between them, they bring decades of experience at the heart of the geospatial industry, from Nadine's years at NASA and as CEO of the Open Geospatial Consortium to Phil's nearly 3 decades spanning Airbus, his own geospatial business, and 7 years at AWS. Together, they are the originating minds behind the GenAI for Geospatial Challenge, an innovation initiative now in its 2nd edition, designed to uncover new organizations, ideas, and applications at the intersection of generative AI and geospatial data. In this episode, we explore why this moment, with thousands of new satellites in orbit and an explosion of accessible AI-readable data, marks a genuine inflection point for the industry. Nadine and Phil reflect on what they discovered through the challenge, from malaria monitoring to trading algorithms built on geospatial intelligence, discuss the gap between Gen AI hype and real-world readiness, and share their thoughts on where the worlds of Gen AI and geospatial are heading next. Hi, Nadine. Hi, Phil. Welcome to the podcast today.
Hey, Julia.
Hello.
So for those unfamiliar with you both, could you please introduce yourselves?
First of all, great to be here with you, Julia and Phil. And so, yes, for those unfamiliar with me, I've been in the geospatial ecosystem for about a couple of decades. Phil, we're getting there. From NASA to remote sensing, earth science, to the CEO of the Open Geospatial Consortium, so the standards ecosystem, to now running my own advisory business, LunateAI, working interestingly with organizations to navigate this amazing intersection of AI and geospatial. And for those who know me, you know, I've always been about lowering the barriers to geospatial. So findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. And that's why I got so excited to, be part of the AWS challenge, because what Phil and his team at AWS are doing to lower the barriers, they're rewriting how everybody can interact with geospatial. So it's exciting to be here.
Excellent. Welcome, Nadine. Phil, now over to you.
Thank you. So for those who don't know me, my name is Phil Cooper. I'm currently the Geospatial Global Lead for the Amazon Public Sector team. Apologies for the long job title. It always changes. They always say there's one thing that's constant, it's change. I've got a 27-year background, nearly 28 years background in Earth observation science and geospatial projects and programs. I work for a large organization called Airbus, some of you may know, for some years. I ran my own geospatial business as well for nearly 8 years. And in the past 7 years, I've worked at AWS, and I've seen the transition from, I would say, presentations with data acetates on overhead projectors through to small microprocessing of satellite imagery on premises to servers, and now really focusing very hard on helping customers work with the enormous compute resources of AWS Cloud. And working with the challenge has been a fantastic opportunity to see how those stories continue to advance. And so, that's me. I'm very keen to continue to help frame that story in the coming years, because it's certainly a story that's evolving very fast. And the challenge has been a great opportunity to do that directly. Working with Nadine, working with yourselves has been fantastic.
Great. Yeah, welcome, Phil. And it's really great to have you both together in the podcast today, because you've been in the geospatial industry for so many years and you saw many trends coming and going. And my first question would be, why is this moment with the advent of Gen AI so important for the geospatial industry?
I'll be honest with you, it's a big, big part of this. I think we've been through several waves of data arriving in the geospatial world. I call it the 3 ages of Earth observation data. So in the 90s, we had desktop GIS, and there was everyone would get one piece of data set and you would pore over it for hours, and entire PhDs, I would often say, would be written on a single satellite image that you could get hold of. And then you sort of had the second wave where commercial industry started to invest in satellites and GPS positioning, but it was still quite expensive. So the barrier was still very high, but it was more of it. It was more promise. Now we're really into a third sort of age really of geospatial data creation, because we have thousands of satellites being launched now. We have hundreds and thousands of new startup businesses discovering geospatial data for the first time. And with artificial intelligence and machine learning now able to mine those thousands of data sets that are being produced, actually that inflection point, which we keep hearing about, is happening right in front of our eyes, because we have companies who don't even have to have any geospatial expertise at all, suddenly discovering geospatial data for the first time because it's easier to do so. And it's on us. I think it's beholden on us and what we do in our industry to sort of reach out more and more to companies and organizations that have never worked it before to take advantage of it. So that's really what I'd say. It's really about data. I don't know what you'd comment on that, Nadine.
I just came back from a robotics event. And so they were talking, it's Earth observation and sensors and data from robots, which you can only do, right, with this marriage of AI and sort of the new generation of geospatial data management, right? So to me, I think +1 to everything you said, Phil, the real amazing moment right now is that anybody with a bright idea, right, as the challenge has shown, can actually turn it into something, into a solution, into a prototype, into a business. And I think that's the amazing thing about this moment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I still also remember what you said, Phil, like when we basically needed to order a single satellite scene and wait for 1 or 2 months until it arrives. And there was like research money for you could only get like 1 or 2 scenes. And yeah, you needed to then really work on these scenes. And yeah, at that time, we would have never thought we come this way, speaking in 2026 about like being on terabytes and petabytes of data, and this is really exciting. So you are both the originating minds of the GenAI for Geospatial Challenge, and which is like an innovation initiative. Like it's not only like one single event, but more like an initiative that now already ran for the second time. So Phil, from AWS perspective and your own, why did you decide to start this challenge that combines GenAI and geospatial applications, and what were you hoping to discover or catalyze through this competition?
So first of all, the why did we want to do this? We actually ran a challenge in 2024 in North America, and it was sort of the first time that we'd actually looked at approaching this with regards really listening and learning from customers what they want to do with geospatial data sets. So in EMEA, what we wanted to do is do the same again, but really sort of go further, really, I suppose. And when I say go further, is more diversity in terms of submissions, greater diversity in terms of ideas, and also, and this is people have heard me say this before, I wanted to find the company I'd never heard of, because that's the one that excites me the most. When you have worked in this industry for some years, and we start to sound terrible when we start saying about that, it's always the same organizations' names that come up working with geospatial data. What this challenge afforded us the opportunity was to find out new organizations and new challenges that they wanted to approach. And there's, again, more diversity in terms of not just the people applying, but the ideas that went into that. So that was the why do we want to do, is find out more about that, because the outcome, obviously, from an AWS point of view, is we can start understanding what do we need to do with the services that we build. 90% of all AWS services are based on customer demand. So that the more information, the more voice of the customer we get, the more feedback we can put to the service teams, it actually helps our business move forward. So that's also the why. And I was delighted, and I've been, just listening to organizations like Aspia Space, RASI, Geoterra, Vida, Atom AI, Sproxel. I would have never come across these wonderful organizations before. And Sproxel, and I'm going to call out one in particular, which absolutely blew me away. They are delivering intelligence, monitoring malaria and the health services for malaria response, which is brilliant, absolutely brilliant that we've been able to accomplish that, help them move forward because we've given them some compute capabilities to do that. So why did we do it? We wanted to hear the stories. What did we get out of it? Diversity. and new stories that we're going to keep going forward with.
Thank you, Phil. So Nadine, you coordinated the first edition of the GenAI for Geospatial Challenge in 2024. Could you just summarize like what innovations you saw coming out from that edition?
I love the question and I love Phil's answers. I'm just gonna, Phil, have you answer all the questions first and say what Phil said was amazing. But I think we started this challenge and we said we want to demonstrate the art of the possible. And if this was a success criteria, I think, this whole challenge series has been like A++, because every, Phil, you rattled through the companies and, we all have our like little nuggets here and there. We definitely demonstrated the art of the possible. And I think my favorite part on the first challenge, and I hope we'll see it with the Europe, Middle East, Africa one, is that these startups truly latched on to this opportunity to build something, and they're really trying to commercialize it, and they're really trying to sell it and build partnerships. I think that's, to me, what I love the most. It's a true incubation, right? And it's kudos also to the whole team, because I think this means they're picking the right startups who have real problems to solve. There's not fictional problems. They actually are picking real problems. I love the malaria example. I love what, in this current challenge, like what the methane mapping. So the ROSIT, for example. And eventually it's demonstrating the art of the possible. Check. It's breaking down silos in terms of geospatial and industries or countries or, races or genders on all fronts, and then unlocking the value of geospatial. So it's like check, check, check at scale for the future. It's amazing.
Exactly. Basically, the GenAI for Geospatial Challenge is like kind of a spark, and it's really great to see that it's not like a one-off, and then after the challenge, the companies disappear again, but it's more like much bigger ideas coming out. So we just concluded the second edition of the challenge, for which we selected 14 teams across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And so when you both look at these 14 teams we selected for this edition, what patterns or themes did you notice across their proposals, and maybe also how they did differ compared to the first edition, because this is also a very fast moving space?
I think the main difference is the problems that were selected by this second phase felt so much more meaningful, if I can say so. It wasn't a technology challenge. It was truly domain challenges. I think that's, to me, what is like, it makes it so meaningful. And I will rattle, and sorry if I'm forgetting anybody, but, when we talk methane mapping, it affects anybody. And from a company that's in Lebanon, despite, horrible things, that's just like amazing. The cocoa farming, the company, was it BDG? It was
Big
like,
data Ghana,
again,
yeah.
it's just like, again, what I keep saying is like, I get goosebumps because meaningful. The Ocean OS, right? It's like tackling entire oceans, entire oceans. You realize how big this is. So we talk scale. When companies like Vida Place, they're specialized in disasters because we all feel them and experience them regardless of where we are. So this connection to the earth and to humanity, honestly. But the other theme, to your question, Julia, was the industrials, the insurance. So what MetaPlanet is trying to do with the insurers, or again, like the marine applications / insurance. I think it's Bolgia 10, who are trying to do this.
Yeah. Mm.
And there's the infrastructure. So we're also those very smart people who are trying to advance the infrastructure, sort of, I feel, for everybody. This is where I would categorize folks like Globe Holder, for example. So it's just like spatial reasoning, right? And the simulation. That could be for many applications. The multidimensional spatial intelligence platform, GeoTerra, right?
GeoTerra, yeah.
Again, so I feel like this is for everybody. The augmented AI assistant of Vista. So I can go on. And again, sorry if I'm like 14 winners is amazing. But you can see there's just like digging deep into big global and local problems at the same time. There's the infrastructure on the future of spatial intelligence itself. And there's like the industrial strength, like insurance and marine biology and so on. These were, I think, to me, the buckets. And I will say it, maybe every question is going to end with, it's amazing. It's just amazing.
When we first started out with this, there was a lot of universities that were researching the concept of generative AI. We were still very early on. GeoAI was still, even 12, 18 months ago, was in a research phase, very much a development phase. It was very much generative AI. We had lots of St. Louis University, Clark University, looking at research and development programs that were still getting to grips with what's a GFM even look like. These were still being sort of conceptualized, if you will. And I remember at the time, Nadine said they were lucky, very much we're lucky at this time because the opportunity to start thinking about, once again, these volumes of data. And some of the programs and activities that came out of that with thriveGEO and we had Lux Carter, we had organizations like Dante.ai that was using social media and combining it, Crosswalk as well, monitoring. But they were very, very, very much moving early stage. Forward 12 months, and we've moved from generative AI into agentic AI already. And so unsurprisingly, we have organizations who have actually been working with not just one GeoFM, but multiple GeoFMs. And I actually was talking earlier about the fact suddenly there's this competition of who's got the latest, greatest open source GeoFM available for organizations to work with. So our stance at AWS has been about creating an open systems architecture to be multimodal. And so that multimodal approach means that actually organizations are not reliant on a single geospatial foundational model. They're actually asking multiple geospatial foundational models. And you mentioned OceanOS, who have just published their white paper about a maritime geospatial foundational model. And I've just been sat reading it since a meeting we had this morning, fascinated by, of course, why not? Why not have a geospatial foundational model for the oceans? They cover X percentage of the globe. Why on earth aren't we doing this? I'm sure we're going to see this continue to accelerate and benefit, and new AI approaches will emerge. So those will be the things I've observed, and give it another 6 months, 12 months, I'm sure we'll be moving on to the next operational phase of these things.
Definitely. So you both engage with startups and companies, and you come across innovative ideas on a daily basis, and you also follow all the developments in that space quite closely. What are currently the developments or applications in the intersection of GenAI and geospatial that really get you excited, and you say, okay, they're quite promising for the next years?
You mentioned that, Phil, is the whole geospatial foundation models, right? Again, talk about lowering the barriers for other people. Right? So here's where we've come. Here are the foundation models for the future. You talked about it. The agentic AI is huge. So I've been trying to keep up. I have this LinkedIn group where I try to share, all the cool things. And I can't keep up anymore because it's amazing. Literally the latest thing I posted was, I saw this AWS Geospatial Hero.
We've now got a geospatial pack for it.
I know. So it's like, here are MCP servers for processing. It was like, I'm going to say it, how amazing is this? Right? And that's why, Phil, we're starting to talk about world models and physical AI. It's like, it's all the next thing for this intersection of geospatial and AI.
Yeah, and I think at a global scale, we had Bruno from Made with Clay came and presented at our Geospatial Day, and I think he talked about 5 quintillion pixels being processed. How do you sort of grasp that information? I think the next thing that's going to emerge as they move into operational status is they're going to be a lot more focused around governance. And so I think what we're going to witness now is people have gone through the research phase, and now we've got the productization and services phase. As government agencies, and I'm witnessing this firsthand, as government agencies start using the deliverables from the service, you're going to witness a data governance phase. And I think there's going to be, one of our team has been working on what's called a governance passport. So actually, can you accredit the data as it moves through that process so that when it actually arrives in the hands of somebody to make a decision, there's some governance against that data process? And so that's definitely something emerging, because now we have artificial intelligence and machine learning as part of an automation process now, and therefore it's producing deliverables. So instead of having to search the globe for individual trees or field boundaries or pools of water or trampolines or whatever you're looking for, actually you can now start interfacing in a much more natural way. And also not only in the governance and the results, but the very interface with that data is changing. In fact, looking at the demonstrations, it was all agentic interface. One of the great demos is multilingual interface. So you can ask in any language and the model understands you. And I think, again, this is starting to happen because actually they're becoming practically needed. And then even some of the public safety stuff that we're witnessing at the moment, you might get an incident in one language. So in the United Kingdom, for example, multilingual, you might have somebody who speaks Polish reporting an accident and it's appearing in English in the front end thing. I think within this process, the models themselves are becoming used. The interface with those models is much more flexible. And then we're going to start seeing this as sort of part of everyday activity in the next 6-12 months. I'm sure of it.
You mentioned now a very important topic that always comes up when we talk about Gen AI and AI in general. It seems that the technology is there and it will just amaze us further with all the innovations that are coming. I'd be interested also on your take on how do you think we can also establish more trust on these applications specifically for the users, so that we really also see that users who use these systems can also follow back where the information comes from.
Multiple industries, again, that have really only just dabbed on the side of geospatial and Earth observation because the data has never been available or not available at a speed of latency that's valuable to them or a resolution that's useful to them. Again, those are going away. So, vegetation proximity to power lines, railway lines, infrastructure services, organizations we deal with, like companies like Estera, for example, is a company who do substance pipeline monitoring. And so those industries now, construction industry, how do we be efficient? Increasingly in the construction industry, they are mandated to look at the entire life cycle of a capital investment now, not just the start of that process. So if I'm developing this now, what's the materials I've used? What's the credibility of those materials? How do I maintain that? And then project forward when the end of that particular capital program comes in as well. These are all things that are gained from geospatial data. And oftentimes these are companies and organizations that won't have any knowledge at all, but they know that they've got a specific problem. And there again, that's starting to accelerate forward. So I think industries all the time are coming to use these intelligence models. And we mentioned insurance, we mentioned finance, and the list just keeps growing. And what's different, back to my point about the 3 ages again, was a lot was promised, I think, last time and never actually was able to deliver because of perhaps a very famous incident, which I'll no names near Pacture, where a phone call came in from an insurance company. And the insurance company said, well, there's a flood happening right now. Can you give me the satellite image? To which the response was, can you wait 2 or 3 days until we get a satellite over the area? And that microcosmic example then has changed now, because actually within minutes you can get coverage. Within minutes you can get updated information now. So that industry trusts the data. And I think those are where the changes are going to happen and definitely shift forward in the coming, once again, months and years.
So we were involved, Phil, right, with the GeoAI festival in the UK. And at the center was trust. And we talked a lot about trust. And the conversation always came back, was like, isn't this part data governance or mostly data governance? Because eventually trust is a personal thing, right? I either trust this or not, and I could trust it for an application, and somebody else, same data, same platform, they wouldn't trust it for another application or type of question. But the data governance is spot on. This is where also standards came up, and the role of essentially sort of like we're all now redefining or defining a new generation of standards that includes the semantics and the provenance and the integrity of the data, all packaged so that you can, at least when it's tangible, you can trust, you can check, right? It came from these sources. This is what was done to it. It's stored here, right? The whole sovereignty, it's all bundled eventually in that trust. So I think, like Phil said, it's definitely the next thing because this is the next step in making it operational and trustable for every question. It's not like, oh, I demoed it, it worked. It's just like, no, this is something I'm going to roll. And we have customers today that say, and these are what's like agencies that have been around for like 150 years. Imagine how much data they have. And they see all these demos and they say, my reputation is the most important thing. So I'm not going to put something out there that would damage. And you know what damages the reputation? A little thing. One person doing some query that ends up in some scandal.
So I have actually a question now on the applications and really the use of GenAI and geospatial in different industries, because this is one of the big excitements. I would also say that like with GenAI and with this wealth of data, we can finally also bring it to industries that haven't used geospatial data before. And so I'd be interested in your perspectives on which sectors do you think will be transformed first, or we see the biggest impact with GenAI and geospatial?
It's all these little players, right, that where the bar was too high before. And now, seriously, you can go to Legend and then click where you don't even have to type. The oil refineries, you just like click and you start to drill. You don't have to train. You don't have to get data. You don't fascinating. Energy, mostly because of the recent crisis with, Strait of Hormuz, and all of a sudden, right, the energy sector has been totally, I think, you talk about transformation, and this is like, transformed forever, right? Because once they integrate this, they're gonna stay with it because it gives them an edge. And what I've also seen, and this is not quite my area, it's all the trading. The traders, right? The Wall Street traders. So if you talk to people on Wall Street, that's the finance where they used to have their terminals, and they've had geospatial before because you're following supply chain and the repercussions of where the plants are, and that's where the disaster occurred and how that impacts. But now they can process so much more data so much quickly, right? We're not inventing anything new. We're just making all of our lives just faster in a way.
Now we finally get insights and also insights and additional intelligence from the data, where just before it took too long to process, or it was too complex, or you needed to combine different data sets and it was just too difficult. And yeah.
Yeah, because it just occurred to me, speaking of Wall Street, and this was just an experiment by one guy, but that's the beauty. That's why we're doing startups and funds, like one guy sitting down. And I think it's this marriage of the agentic AI with all the, the geospatial data and the AI and the infrastructure, where he created all these trading personas, right? And have fight against each other to get sort of like the best index for. And he's like, my index beat the other indices out there. This is when I was like, you're never going to hear about something like this to transform. But this will happen in the future for every index fund out there, because that's the research in the background that people used to make. And now it can happen instantaneously because agents can go around and collect all sorts of data, geospatial and non-geospatial, and boom.
I think you mentioned this during your keynote on the kickoff of the GenAI for Geospatial Challenge. Geospatial data is part of the engine, but it's not the result. And I think GenAI is also enabling that transition, and it's really exciting. So we talked now a lot about what we already see and like what we are excited about. But are there any unexplored combinations of GenAI and geospatial, or any applications you actually think teams should start investigating or have big potential, but you didn't see specific applications yet?
I'm going to be controversial, because it's always fun to be controversial. I wouldn't actually change anything other than having more companies and more people hearing about the outcome, because I think we set out to accomplish a mission, which I think we definitely accomplished, which was find companies and organizations. So in terms of what we had to accomplish, definitely. I think what we would do next, slightly different question, because I think what we do next is I'd like to have more people involved, and early stage geographers. I'm a big advocate of teaching the next generation because, I've got 4 kids and I want them, at least one of them, to like geography. And I think it's the next time around is how do we make it an educational experience, perhaps, as well as a business experience. So there we go. So I think what we did was spot on. We accomplished our goals. It was great. It's just going to be how do we train and connect the next generation of geographers, and how do we get them realizing the value in this data, and not that it's just some throwaway component. It's actually got some real value and insight in it. So I think there we go. That's where I'd go. More education and more people. Definitely.
That's a difficult question because we're barely able to process what people are doing right now. What I would like to see opportunities and future challenges to be also catalysts across communities. So IoT is a great example, robotics, because they are building their thing. They're calling it living, thinking digital twin. So bringing the world models to be catalysts also for genuine bringing communities together so that we're not duplicating the thinking, the effort, the technologies, the standards, all of it.
And then it's coming back to standards again and trying to interoperate systems and data. So we are now just about to wrap up, and I have actually 2 questions I'd like to ask you as closing thoughts. The first question is, if you could change one thing about how the industry approaches at the moment GenAI and geospatial, what would it be?
The favorite thing that stuck in my head was that GeoAI is both overhyped and underutilized. And I think I would change these things. So the overhype is, Phil, you mentioned it at the very beginning. When we're coming to work with organizations to introduce this operationally, right? So there's accountability here. The leadership doesn't quite understand what's going on here. And some of them, and it's extreme, some of them think, right, that this GenAI, GeoAI is this magic. Ta-da, right? Because you're all doing it. It's like, no, right? So it's like, this is the overhype in a way. It's like, no, it's not magic. There's a lot of work of AI readiness and data readiness and organizational readiness that are there. And then there is the underutilized, as in, we're now encouraging people, you have to think big, but you have to start somewhere. So just like it has to be way more out there, right? So we need to start building it small in everything so that we can. So in 10 years, we don't say, we thought this was going to do it, but it didn't do it because the uptake wasn't there or it didn't scale or people were scared, right? So I would handle, we called it leadership literacy. Right? That's what I would change about the ecosystem. Yes. So it's like from both ends. There's the leader literacy and there's the next generation.
So if there's one final departing thought or idea or shout out you would like to give to our listeners related to the potential of GenAI for geospatial or generally GenAI for geospatial, what would it be?
I would say we started with proving the art of the possible, right? So congratulations to everybody who was involved in the challenge, including you, Julia, and your team, and Phil, the AWS team, because it's not just the startup, it's the whole ecosystem that was created. Definitely, like I said, check art of the possible. We're beyond the challenge, so thinking about the next iteration. We're also beyond geospatial because we're talking about multimodal on so many fronts. And I would go back to, you have this opportunity that if you have a bright idea about anything that involves, let's say, the living, thinking digital twin of anything, right? Go for it. Think big. And we are here to support you.
Just keep experimenting, keep innovating, keep testing. Don't be frightened of failing. I think, what is it Winston Churchill said, is success is failure followed by failure followed by failure. So I'm a huge advocate in terms of, please let us help you experiment, let us help you fail fast, and let us help you get to that success that I think is the thing that we're always looking for with the data we work with.
That's probably the best closing thought. So basically, fail, think big, fail, but improve, and then the future is bright. So thank you so much, Nadine and Phil, for being on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julia.